Thank you very much for talking to us today. You helped negotiate this deal. You gave years of your life to try and make this deal happen. The Americans have walked away from it a year ago, and now it looks like your own government may withdraw at least partially from it. Do you think the JCPOA is a dead deal now?
Not yet. We are very hopeful that we can, in fact, get some decisions to rectify the situation. But the decisions that Iran has taken at this moment is within the parameters of the JCPOA. It's not, in fact, destined to undermine the JCPOA. They are destined to enforce the JCPOA in a manner that JCPOA could be implemented effectively, because the JCPOA has not been implemented for a while. Iran has been committed and implementing all its obligations, but the other sides have not been able to implement their obligations. And that is a situation that cannot be continued in this manner. So Iran wanted to give a very important signal that things should be rectified and should be redressed. So we have used the JCPOA parameters itself to give this signal that we want other parts and parties to also implementing their obligations.
By JCPOA, most people here understand the Iranian nuclear deal. You have said to Europe they must do certain things, otherwise you will do certain things. There will be consequences in 2 months' time. What happens if the Europeans do not react in a way you want them
to? As I said, there is a deficit of confidence, further confidence between the parties, and we have not been able to receive in fact, the advantages that are defined within the JCPOA for our economy. So we have been implementing our commitments without receiving the proper returns for those obligations. So we hope that the European partners would be able, that after the 1 year patience from Iran, to find negotiated solutions which would allow that Iran would be able to export its oil and receive the revenues.
But the Europeans surely would have done everything that they can by now. What else can they do? What more have they got to give?
That is exactly the point, that in fact they should be able to be a little bit more vigorous and taking some of the risks, because these things are not easy issues. They should take some risks to be able to salvage the nuclear deal. Otherwise, it cannot be continued the way it is.
And if they don't, your government's prepared to go back to enriching uranium?
We are, for the moment, engaged in enriching uranium, but there are certain parameters, and we are bound to, in fact, to implement our commitments, including the enrichment uranium within those parameters. But we have said that if these cannot be sustained, we would suspending some of those parameters, and we would be beyond some of those parameters defined in the nuclear deal.
And people like Jeremy Hunt, the British Foreign Secretary, has said there will be grave consequences for Iran if you do so. Does that not worry you?
There would be certainly grave consequences from Iran if they would not be able to find a solution. And we have already elaborated that what are those consequences, and if in certain 60 days would not be a solution, Iran would be implementing its second phase measures that has been announced, and certainly the situation would be worse. And we hope that, in fact, they would take this message from Iran very seriously and find a solution.
But is your government in a position to be setting out ultimatums to Europeans who say they're doing what they can to try and make this deal work?
It's not ultimatum, it's only call for effective implementation of the deal. There is a deal that has been multilateral achievement and the success of the multilateral diplomacy, and what Iran is asking is the implementation of the deal.
Looking at what America is doing, they've moved B-52 bombers to the region, they've moved an aircraft carrier strike group. They're talking about 120,000 soldiers possibly going to the region. You're a seasoned diplomat. Do you think America is looking for a fight, looking for war? And if it is Iran ready for that?
I think part of this is within the theatrical maneuvers by the US administration. Our analysis is that they at least the President Trump doesn't want to engage into a military confrontation with Iran because he knows that how much it would be costly for the United States and for the region. But while we have renounced any escalation, military escalation in the region, I would assure you that Iranian government and Iranian armed forces are fully ready for any eventuality in the region. So they should not really try to test the determination of Iran to confront any, in fact, escalation in the region.
It sounds like they're preparing for the possibility of conflict.
They are preparing. As I said, some of these can be seen as theatrical maneuvers, but we are also prepared for any eventuality. And for the first time, I can tell you that Iranian nation is fully supporting the government to, in fact, prepare for such eventuality, to prepare for different scenarios.
There are reports that the Iranians were behind these sabotage attacks on freighters and tankers in the Gulf, and today reports of pipelines in Saudi Arabia being attacked. Is Iran behind those attacks?
Unfortunately, this is not a new thing that any problem in the region is attributed to Iran, or as they call it, proxies of Iran. We have always rejected these possibilities, and Iran is the first country who is interested to keep the peace and stability in the region. We, in fact, are very cognizant about the sensitivity of the situation, and we are very concerned and very suspicious about these acts done yesterday. Unfortunately, there were misinterpretations, and even for a good part of the day, the countries engaged were rejecting the possibilities for such sabotages. But suddenly we saw that there are here and there gathering some news that would channelize the news in a manner that they would be trying to, in fact, be trying to engage Iran with this. We totally reject this. It is very suspicious to us, and we hope that the international fact-finding mission could really find the reasons for these sabotages, which are very suspicious to us.
Do you think Iran's being framed and blamed for this unfairly?
Iran has been always unfairly blamed for many things in the region. We have been a country which has been paying many costs for keeping the peace and stability in the region, being in our relations with our neighbors, which have very good relations, be it in the Persian Gulf. So we would be committing to our international obligations and also our responsibility to keep peace and stability in the region.
The Americans say their policy is working and that they are putting your government under enormous pressure. It's just a matter of time before the government either falls or is forced back to the negotiating table. Is that a fair characterization of where your government is now, do you think?
Maybe not the whole system in the US, but unfortunately, partially that has been in fact, the simplification of the kind of illusion that they have, that in fact they can pressurize Iran and the government of Iran, and they can really look for regime change in Iran. But I tell you that the Iranian nation is very solid at this moment. Even some of the elements and some of the political parties in Iran which were a little bit skeptical about the approach which has adopted by the government are now fully supporting the government, that we should really be resisting any provocations by the US, because Iran has been very faithful in implementing its shares of obligations, and now this is the time that the other parties should also behave very responsibly in the region, and the main parties to the JCPOA and nuclear deal to also implement their obligations.
I have to ask you about this woman who was charged and sentenced for spying yesterday in the wake of Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe as well. The government and Nazanin's husband says that the Iranians are engaged in hostage diplomacy. Why is Iran continuing to arrest these women and charging them with espionage?
Each day, thousands of Iranian dual nationals, including the UK Iranian dual nationals are traveling to Iran through various flights, and never we have adopted a policy of intimidation against dual nationals, because they are very respected Iranians, which we appreciate what they are doing in the UK. But certainly that should not be a misunderstanding, that if certain of these dual nationals would be engaged in illegal activities, certainly they should be also expecting to be facing with punishment by the law. So this is an incident that we also are pursuing this to receive more information from Tehran. But as I said, this should not be seen as a policy that would be pressurizing against the dual nationals. But Iran is in a very, of course, sensitive situation, and if there would be a decision by some dual nationals or some Iranian nationals to contravene the law and in fact be in relationship illegally with the secret services or intelligence services, to in fact adopt some decisions against their own countries, they should be expecting to face the law.
Let me ask you personally, you've been very involved in this nuclear deal. You've been ambassador here now. You've been very involved in improving relations between the West and Iran. How worried are you, how frustrated are you by the way things are going under the Trump administration and what we're seeing now with the nuclear deal?
The reality is that after the withdrawal of the United States from the nuclear deal, the situation is not very helpful, because we were expecting that the level of cooperation, including the economic field and trade area, would be promoted between the two countries. A lot of good contracts and agreements were signed between the two sides, in fact, which were very encouraging. But unfortunately, after these incidents, the UK companies have been under tremendous pressure to cut their relationship with Iran, which in fact proved that we cannot continue to, in fact, to live under this pressure. So the European three are fully responsible that, in fact, they would adopt some measures that would protect the UK companies, that they would be in normal relationship with Iran. And that is exactly what we are seeking. And we hope that, in fact, the relationship between the two countries in terms of trade, economy, and other areas would be bringing prosperity and happiness for the two nations. And we hope that it can be, in fact, the situation would be better and better. And we would be able, through a negotiated solution, would find a solution to allow the UK companies to enter into a good relationship with their Iranian partners.